Your key doesn't work because you don't work here anymore. My daughter Renee said it through the locked glass doors of Brooks Freight and Logistics. She stood inside with her arms folded, while my son-in-law Marcus held a small cardboard box filled with the things from my office: my coffee mug, a framed photograph of my late wife Lorraine, and the brass nameplate that had sat on my desk for 22 years. I tried the key again anyway. The lock flashed red again. 2 dispatchers watched from behind the counter. A young security guard I had hired 3 summers earlier stared at the floor. Beyond them, 38 blue trucks rested in the yard I had bought when it was red clay, weeds, and a collapsing tobacco shed. "Dad," Renee said, "please don't make this harder. The board voted. You're no longer part of management." "There are 3 people on that board," I said. "You, Marcus, and me. You chose not to attend. You scheduled the meeting during my cardiology appointment." Marcus stepped forward and pushed the box toward me. He wore a burgundy tie, and the careful expression of a man pretending a cruel decision was only business. "Piedmont Consolidated is coming Friday to complete the purchase," he said. "They want one chain of command. No mixed authority, no confusion." I took the box, but did not move. Renee lowered her voice. "You built something valuable. You should be proud, but it's time to let us lead." What neither of them understood was that the company they planned to sell did not own the ground beneath their shoes. It did not own the maintenance building, the fuel island, or the fenced yard holding every truck included in their $12 million deal. Those belonged to Brooks Yard Holdings, a separate company with one owner: me. And the lease said no new owner could operate there without my written permission. A black sedan turned through the gate 2 days earlier than expected. A silver-haired woman stepped out carrying a leather portfolio. She looked at the locked door, then at the box in my hands. "Mr. Brooks," she called, "I'm Evelyn Shaw from Piedmont Consolidated. Before Friday, I need to clear up one issue." Renee's face tightened. Evelyn opened a property map. "Who owns this land?" "My name is Isaiah Brooks. I was 63 that spring, and I had spent 35 years building Brooks Freight, from 1 used tractor, 2 borrowed trailers, and a promise Lorraine and I made at our kitchen table. In the beginning, I drove all day and repaired engines at night. Lorraine kept invoices in a green ledger after putting our children to bed. We skipped vacations, wore coats one winter longer than we should have, and parked the truck behind our house because a real terminal was beyond anything we could afford. Our first business property was 12 acres outside Greensboro. The trucking company was too young to qualify for the loan, so Lorraine and I refinanced our home and bought the land ourselves. Years later, our attorney placed it in a separate family company, so one highway accident could not take everything we owned. The first night the deed became ours, Lorraine and I stood beneath a broken security light, while rain softened the red clay around our shoes. She pressed the folded papers against my chest. "Whatever happens to the trucks," she said, "keep the ground. Ground gives a family somewhere to begin again." I never forgot that sentence. Renee grew up around the company. At 12, she sorted fuel receipts. At 16, she answered weekend calls. After college and several years at a national carrier, she returned with ideas about route software, electronic billing, and expansion. She was intelligent, disciplined, and determined not to be treated like the owner's daughter. Marcus came later with an MBA, polished shoes, and charts that made every risk look smaller than it was. He understood financing and acquisitions. What he did not understand was why a driver with 20 faithful years deserved patience during one bad month, or why a handshake given during a storm could be worth more than a clause printed in a contract. 2 years after Lorraine died, I made Renee president. I remained chairman and handled major customers, the bank, and the property. My plan was to teach her the parts of the business that could not be learned from a dashboard, then step back slowly. First, a weekly meeting moved without anyone telling me. Then, my name disappeared from a customer proposal. Marcus told suppliers to call him instead of me. Renee asked me not to visit the dispatch floor because my conversations with drivers were disrupting the new reporting structure. I told myself she needed room. Every time she closed one door, I stepped back so she would not feel crowded. I did not realize that making myself smaller was teaching her the company could pretend I was already gone. The week before the lockout, Lillian Reed, our dispatcher of 26 years, came into my office and closed the door. "They're preparing a sale book," she said. "Customer contracts, equipment values, payroll, everything. They told supervisors not to discuss it with you." That evening, I asked Renee directly whether she planned to sell. "Piedmont can take us into 6 states," she said. "They'll bring lower insurance rates, larger contracts, and capital we'll never raise alone." She pushed a folder across the conference table. The offer was $12 million for the operating company, subject to its debt and the buyer's conditions. Renee would become a regional vice president. Marcus would receive a consulting contract. Office employees were guaranteed 6 months. Drivers and mechanics would be reviewed later. I closed the folder. "You promised them the yard?" "We promised continuity of operations." "That is not the same thing." Her jaw tightened. "This is why we waited to tell you. You turn every strategic decision into a family trial." "It became a family trial when you hid it from the man whose name is on the gate." She leaned forward. "Your name is the problem. Every customer asks for you. Every driver compares me to you. Every time I make a decision, someone says, 'Your father would have done it differently.' I cannot lead while you stand behind me correcting the room." Marcus said, "The sale is moving forward. I won't support a deal I have not reviewed." The next morning, they scheduled a board meeting during my medical appointment. By noon, my consulting role was terminated. By 4, the locks were changed. Back at the gate, Evelyn Shaw waited for an answer. "Brooks Yard Holdings owns the land," I said. "And who owns Brooks Yard Holdings?" "I do." Renee came outside and pulled the glass door shut behind her. "Dad, this is not the place." Evelyn turned a page in her portfolio. "The documents we received did not include the full property lease. Our offer assumes we can keep using this terminal after the purchase." Marcus forced a smile. "The property has served the company for decades. There has never been a problem." "There is a problem now," Evelyn said. "A buyer cannot purchase trucks, promise delivery capacity, and later discover it has nowhere to park or repair them." Renee took my arm and guided me several steps away. "You knew they would ask," she whispered. "I knew a serious buyer would check what it was buying." "Are you trying to ruin this for me?" "I learned about your sale 3 days ago. This deal protects the company." "It protects your title." Her face flushed. "You think because your name is on old paperwork, you can hold everyone hostage?" "No," I said. "I think signatures mean something before people need them." Evelyn closed her portfolio. "Mr. Brooks, I would like to meet with you and your attorney tomorrow morning. Until we understand the property rights, Piedmont is pausing the closing." I drove to see Dana Price, the attorney who had handled our property work for almost 20 years. She spread the deed, the lease, and the sale summary across her table. "They had the authority to remove you from a consulting job," she said. "They did not have the authority to promise your land to a buyer. The company can keep operating under the current lease, but a new owner needs your approval." "Could they move?" "Eventually. But not in a week. The trucks are serviced here. The fuel permits are here. The customers were told this was the terminal. Moving would cost time and money. There is one more thing. The bank financed most of the fleet when you were still chairman. You guaranteed part of that loan. Before the trucks can be transferred and your guarantee released, the bank needs your signature on the payoff papers. If you were in my position, would you still sign for your child after she locked you out of the company you built?" Renee had humiliated me. Marcus had treated my life's work like an asset he could package. Still, hundreds of people depended on those trucks. Drivers had mortgages. Mechanics had children in college. Lillian was raising a grandson. I could stop the sale, but if I stopped the company with it, innocent people would pay for a family wound they did not create. The next morning, Evelyn arrived at Dana's office with Piedmont's lawyer and finance director. Renee and Marcus came 10 minutes late. Renee took the seat farthest from me. Evelyn spoke first. Piedmont's offer assumed three things: continued use of the yard, transfer of the finance trucks, and retention of the company's largest customers. We now know none of those things is automatic. The finance director shook his head. The bank confirmed that Mr. Brooks must sign before the fleet can be released for sale. Evelyn said, "Our second concern is Carolina Home Goods." Carolina Home Goods represented nearly 1/5 of our revenue. 18 years earlier, during an ice storm, larger carriers refused its emergency loads. I called 3 trusted drivers and delivered every shipment before Monday. Since then, I had never broken a promise to them. Evelyn continued, "Carolina Home Goods will not commit to Piedmont until it meets with Mr. Brooks and receives assurances that the dispatchers and drivers serving its account will remain." Renee stared at the letter. "He is no longer management." "The customer is not asking who holds a title," Evelyn said. "It is asking who kept the promises." That was the first time someone outside our family said plainly what my daughter had refused to see. I had not been standing behind her to steal her authority. I had been holding relationships she had never been told how to carry. During a break, Renee followed me into the hallway. "You're enjoying this," she said. "You finally get to prove that nobody can do anything without you. I wanted you to call before you change the locks. I need you to approve the yard, sign for the bank, and reassure Carolina Home Goods." Her voice dropped. "What do you want?" The question hurt more than the cardboard box. She believed every decision had a price hidden behind it. "I wanted the truth before you tried to sell my life's work. I was protecting the deal from your emotions. You were protecting it from my judgment. They are the same thing to you. No. Emotion is remembering Lillian has given this company half her life. Judgment is noticing your buyer guarantees her only 6 months. Emotion is being angry that you removed my nameplate. Judgment is knowing the yard, bank, and biggest customer were never secured. So this is punishment. This is the first honest review your deal has received." We returned to the conference room. Evelyn asked whether I would allow Piedmont to use the yard after the sale. "I will consider a new lease," I said, "but not under the terms Renee promised. I want current terminal employees protected for 1 year unless they give real cause for dismissal. I want earned vacation honored. I want severance based on years of service. And I want the maintenance shop kept open long enough for the mechanics to choose whether to stay or leave." The meeting ended without an agreement. Piedmont extended its review by 10 days. Renee returned to the company. I remained locked out. That afternoon, 3 people came to my house: Lillian, Earl Jackson from the maintenance shop, and Calvin Moss, one of our senior drivers. Earl carried my brass nameplate. "Marcus threw it in the trash," he said. "I figured it belonged with you." Lillian held Lorraine's green ledger. "Renee told us to clear out old records. She called this clutter." Calvin brought a folded resignation letter. "Marcus says Piedmont may make us reapply at lower mileage rates. I'm not begging for the job I helped build." I placed the nameplate and ledger on the kitchen table. "Do not resign for me," I told Calvin. "Your family should not lose income because mine lost its way." He shook his head. "It is not only about you. They canceled the safety breakfast. They told drivers not to call Lillian after hours because her position may disappear. Marcus keeps saying loyalty does not show on a balance sheet." "Neither does fear," Lillian said, "but the whole building is full of it." They told me Renee had become quieter since the buyer's visit. Marcus was pushing another plan: move the trucks to a cheaper terminal near Burlington, sell the company later, and leave my yard behind. "Can the new place handle the fleet?" I asked. Earl laughed once without humor. "It has 2 repair bays. We have 6. Half the trailers would sit in paid lots." Calvin said, and Carolina Home Goods would be an hour farther from its main warehouse. The plan was not a solution. It was a threat designed to make me believe they could replace everything I owned. After they left, I opened Lorraine's ledger. Beside my missed paycheck from our first month, she had written, "Isaiah says the company comes first. Remind him the family is the reason." The company had survived because Lorraine and I knew the business existed to protect people, not the other way around. Somewhere along the years, Renee had learned to measure her worth by whether she could make the company bigger than I had. Marcus had learned to measure it only by what someone would pay. The next morning, I asked Dana to obtain the latest financial reports. I did not need a courtroom battle. I needed to know whether the company could survive if the sale failed. The answer was painful but simple. Marcus had borrowed against several trailers to fund 2 new routes that were already losing money. Revenue looked larger, but empty return trips and overtime were eating the cash. The company was not bankrupt. It was running out of room to make another mistake. The $12 million offer sounded generous until the debt was paid. Renee and Marcus had presented the sale as a triumph because admitting the truth would mean admitting their expansion had failed. I called Renee and asked her to meet me alone at the yard after sunset. She arrived in her SUV, but did not unlock the office. We stood beside the fuel island where she had washed trucks for summer money as a teenager. "The Burlington terminal will not work," I said. "Marcus says it can." "Marcus says whatever keeps the sale alive." She crossed her arms. "You pulled the financial records. I am still a shareholder, and my property is tied to this company. Then you know we need Piedmont. I know you need a decision." That is not the same thing. A truck returned through the gate. Calvin raised 2 fingers from the cab, the same greeting drivers had given me for decades. Renee watched him park. "I thought if I completed this sale, people would finally see me as more than your daughter," she said. "Who made you believe I needed you to defeat me before I could respect you? You did sometimes. Every customer asked for you. Every driver had a story about you. Even when my changes worked, they said you had raised me well." I should have seen how heavy that became. Her eyes shone, but her voice stayed hard. "You always walked into a room already trusted. I had to prove I belonged in my own last name." "I understand that better now," I said. "But feeling unseen did not give you permission to erase me. You could have built your authority. Instead, you tried to borrow it from a buyer. What happens if you refuse? Piedmont probably lowers the price or leaves. The bank demands a recovery plan. We close the losing routes, sell extra trailers, reduce executive spending, and rebuild slowly. And if you sign, you become a vice president in someone else's company. Marcus gets his contract. Some employees stay. Some disappear after 6 months. The Brooks name may remain on the trucks, but it will belong to people who never knew your mother. What do you want me to do? I want you to decide which loss you can live with. The deal, the company, or the person you have become while chasing both." She turned toward me. "Will you come back if I stop the sale?" "Not as the father who fixes everything before you feel the cost. Not as a chairman you can remove when my judgment becomes inconvenient." "He is my husband," she said quietly. "I know. That is why the right decision will still hurt. For years, I had protected her from painful choices. I paid bills before she knew they were late. I covered mistakes before consequences reached her. I thought that was fatherhood. Standing beside that fuel island, I understood that protection without boundaries can become permission. Piedmont's final meeting took place 3 days later at Brooks Freight. Evelyn sat at the head of the conference table. The bank's senior lender joined by video. Renee, Marcus, Dana, and I sat across from one another. Lillian entered with coffee. She paused beside me. "Good to see you back, Mr. Brooks," she said clearly. It was only one sentence, but it changed the room. I was not an outsider blocking progress. I belonged to the history inside every wall. Evelyn began. "Piedmont can proceed only if we receive the yard lease, the bank signatures, and written support from Carolina Home Goods." The lender spoke from the screen. "We will not release the trucks without Mr. Brooks's signature. If the sale does not proceed, we are willing to discuss a 90-day recovery plan, but the company must stop the losing expansion immediately." Evelyn turned to Renee. "Carolina Home Goods also requires the current dispatch team and primary drivers to remain. Those protections, combined with the property terms, reduce the value of the acquisition to us." She slid a new offer across the table. nearly one-third lower. Renee looked at Marcus. You told me the yard was routine. You told me the bank was routine. You told me the customer would follow the trucks. They would have if your father had cooperated. Evelyn's expression hardened. No, Mr. Cole. They would have if you had secured them before promising them. The practical loss reached Renee all at once. Her title was no longer guaranteed. The price she had treated as proof of success was collapsing. The people she had pushed aside were the very reason the business had value. Marcus leaned toward her. Take the deal. We can make the number work. For whom? She asked. For us. Renee looked at the offer, then at Lillian through the glass wall, dispatching trucks with one hand pressed to her headset. She looked at me. We are suspending the sale, she said. Marcus turned sharply. You cannot decide that alone. As president, I can withdraw management's recommendation. As a shareholder, I will not support this offer. You promised them we would close. I promised them things you told me were already handled. So now you are choosing him. Her voice shook, but she did not raise it. I am choosing not to sell a company by pretending the people, land, and history behind it do not matter. Evelyn gathered her papers. Piedmont will withdraw. For what it is worth, Ms. Brooks, that is the first decision in this process that makes me believe you may be ready to lead. After Piedmont left, the lender remained on the screen. He offered the company 90 days to present a recovery plan. The bank would delay stronger action if we closed the losing routes, sold unused equipment, and accepted outside financial oversight. Renee looked at me. Will you help? I will sign the bank plan and extend the yard lease for 12 months, I said. But there will be conditions. An independent director joins the board. Employee vacation and benefits remain protected. Major borrowing requires full board approval. Financial reports go to every shareholder, not only management. And Marcus's authority over company money is suspended until someone independent reviews the expansion decisions. Marcus stood. You are using the bank to remove me. No, I said. Your decisions brought the bank into this room. I am refusing to hide them. He walked out without another word. The review found no theft. It found carelessness, concealed risks, and numbers presented in ways that made failure look like temporary growth. Marcus resigned before the report was finished. He and Renee separated that summer. I did not celebrate. A father can be proven right and still grieve what the proof costs his child. Recovery was slow and unglamorous. We sold 9 trailers. We closed the 2 losing routes. Renee cut her own salary before asking anyone else to sacrifice. Earl delayed replacing equipment that could safely last another year. Lillian rebuilt the dispatch schedule. Calvin and 2 senior drivers met with Carolina Home Goods and promised the same service under clearer leadership. I attended that customer meeting only long enough to introduce Renee. This is the president of Brooks Freight, I said. She made mistakes. She also chose to face them. Judge her by what she does next. Renee had to rebuild trust one conversation at a time. Some employees never forgave her. Others watched whether her behavior changed after the danger passed. She restored the safety breakfast. She gave Lillian authority over training. She funded Earl's apprentice program instead of replacing older mechanics with outside contractors. Twice a week, she arrived before dawn and rode with drivers to understand why the new route software kept sending empty trucks west. I did not return as chairman. I managed Brooks Yard Holdings and advised the independent director for 6 months. Requests came in writing. Decisions had named owners. Renee and I met once a month for breakfast away from the office, where neither of us could hide behind a title. One morning, she brought Lorraine's green ledger. The cracked binding had been repaired. I read the first year, she said. Mom wrote that you skipped your paycheck for 11 weeks. She also wrote that I was impossible when I was scared. Renee smiled. It was the first easy moment between us in months. I'm sorry I locked you out, she said. Not only from the building, from everything. I'm sorry I made the company so much a part of my love that you thought owning it was the same as earning my approval. Do you forgive me? I'm working on it, I said. Forgiveness is not the same as handing back the keys." She nodded. This time, she did not argue with the boundary. A year later, Brooks Freight made its first payment toward buying the yard from me. Renee remained president, under transparent reporting rules. The independent director chaired the board. Lillian trained a younger dispatcher, and Earl's first apprentice earned his certification. At a smaller property 6 miles away, I opened a driver training and maintenance program named for Lorraine. We taught inspections, contracts, fatigue management, and the business behind the wheel. Calvin designed the road curriculum. Retired mechanics volunteered on Saturdays. Young drivers who had never owned more than a used car learned how to build something without letting it own them. On the day we installed the sign, Renee brought my old brass nameplate. "Put it in the company lobby," I said, "where drivers and mechanics can touch it, and remember that businesses are built by human hands." She gave me a key to the training center. I added it beside the yard key I had never surrendered. The metal clicked softly together. The next morning, I unlocked the training center before sunrise. Young drivers entered carrying notebooks and coffee. Chairs moved across a clean floor. An engine turned over in the workshop. No one asked whether I still had a title. Peace sounded like people beginning again on ground nobody could take from them. Subscribe for more stories about people who were underestimated, betrayed, and finally recognized by the legacy they built.